And so we begin. Thank you for all attending. It's an honor to be with you guys for the next 4 weeks. I hope you can make all 4. Doc and I share a passion for baseball. It's probably the only thing we have in common. And I was honored when he, way back, and I'm not sure when he invited me to participate in his baseball lit class and present some history. So I'm going to do a little bit of that the next 4 weeks, but this is more about the literature. Doc's being easy on you, just using poems. I would have made you read long things, but maybe next time.
Yeah, but it's like when I was at GA, they wouldn't read us, you know?
Yeah, well, from what I understand, it's even worse now. And we're also honored to, this is not Doc and Kendall, but it's Tyler too.
Yes.
Notice a historical reference there, Tyler. I hope you picked that up. Tyler is with us, I hope, for all 4 sessions. We'll be featuring him in one of the upcoming sessions to talk about his book. Here's your first plug of many to come. I hope you all want to read his book, K. It's easily available. You can even do audiobook. If you enjoy the history of baseball and share a passion for baseball, read the book. And it's well received among aficionados in baseball. So here we begin. And I'm just going to start with a little bit of bio background for the 2 of us. And then we'll do a little history, and then we go to the poems. So that's tonight's plan. And Q&A at the end. So I'm a fighting fan, have been for a long time, but I have to admit that I came late to the game compared to Doc and Tyler. I was born into a football family. I lived under the shadow of Nittany, Mount Nittany. Die-hard Penn State fan, went to a lot of games as a little kid, but I do remember my dad taking me in the 1950s to Forbes Field for my first baseball game with the Pirates. Then when I went to college up above Pittsburgh, I started reading the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette sports page and followed the Pirates. And of course, they had a couple good years there in the 70s. And so we were able to get, a couple of my roommates were able to get tickets. We went down to a World Series game and sat behind Roberto Clemente and saw them beat the Orioles that day. It was a wonderful game, and I fell in love with Roberto Clemente, number 1. And I, for the first time, really saw the passion of the game. And that's really when my love of baseball began. Ended up teaching in the Philadelphia area and followed the Phils and became a diehard fan. But what helped bring me into the game was my son, Nate, youngest of 2, who played baseball all the way through high school from Little League on up. And it was his passion, and actually having on his team Lenny Dykstra's son. Lenny Dykstra was a horrible father, by the way, and helped bring me in. But I've followed the Phils ever since. I live out here in Utah, but because of DirecTV baseball package, I can see all the Phillies games, although I don't always get to hear the announcers unless I switch. So that's my passion. That's how it started for me. And before I turn this over to the founding father of Baseball Lit, for those who don't know us well, you just need to know and understand, and I'm sure all of our students do, that Doc and I are very good friends. We share the passion for baseball, but I'm a Phillies fan, and unfortunately, Doc never saw the light, and he's a stinking Mets.
I'm a stinking Mets fan.
So we will razz each other a lot. Profanity could be involved a little bit somewhere along the lines.
Almost assuredly.
Over the last 5 years, a lot of people have become way too angry, and you can't kid around. Well, put that aside, because we do. And it's all in fun. We're not being mean. And I hate the Mets, and he probably hates the Phillies, at least when I'm around. So without further ado, here's Peter Drewniany.
Hey, everyone. I wanted to thank Tyler and Tim, especially for being here, since they were the folks who got me started on this baseball. We did an independent study and read some great books, and then over time, eventually baseball literature became, an elective course, which then it was for quite some time. So I began to become interested in baseball, when I was about 6 years old and other kids were signing up for Little League. And I was vaguely, interested in it. It wasn't really, and I was a terrible player, even at the age of 6, 7, and 8. In fact, the only award that I ever received was a sportsmanship award because I clumsily slid into home plate and cracked my head on the catcher's knee. I was taken to the hospital, and in those days they really didn't worry about concussions, but I to this day think that particular slide affected me psychologically, and some of you may have seen the effects of that. So anyway, and I coached baseball with my son's Little League team, and I distinguished myself with a 0 and 24 mark over 2 seasons. Pretty incredible. But it was my grandfather, who was a fanatical fan for the New York Giants, who, of course, went to San Francisco. And he turned me into a diehard baseball fan and diehard Mets fan. He really smarted from the Giants moving to San Francisco, and he instantly became enamored of the Mets because, after all, there was a National League team in New York. That first year, 1962, the Mets lost 120 games, which I believe is still a major league record. That didn't really bother us, though. I went to the first ever Mets game at the Polo Grounds with my grandfather. And over the years, watched a lot of great players. My grandfather's favorite was Willie Mays of the Giants. And Willie Mays, he had seen play with the Jersey City Giants. He lived in Jersey City. And so he saw Willie Mays in the minor leagues. I really delight in the memories of my grandfather at the games. He had this huge cowbell that he would ring. We always sat in the second row of the right field and the Polo Grounds was a real bandbox, so you were right on top of the players. And he would express his displeasure with certain of the Mets, players, particularly Joe Christopher, the right fielder, with whom he had a particular antipathy. But inevitably, he would greet the Giants whenever we went to quite a few Giants games as, "You bastards, you left us when we needed you." So he resented them except for Willie Mays. Willie Mays was always his favorite player. Now, at the foolish age of 12, I booed Willie Mays when he made a spectacular catch in center field at the Polo Grounds, his old haunt. Grandpa cautioned me, "I never want you to boo Willie Mays again. Real baseball fans don't Boo, Willie Mays. I learned my lesson, and thus began my love affair with baseball.
Thanks, Doc. As I said before, with us is Tyler Kepner, class of '93, a stellar writer in my class, wrote notable history essays. And Doc, I suspect he wasn't too bad in English class either.
He was good. He was a very good, he was very good in writing nonfiction. That's what and it makes sense, right? He was excellent student.
We'll have more time later to give a more proper introduction to Tyler.
I didn't always wear pink shirts, by the way. For some reason, I'm wearing pink shirts. That's maybe the only 2 pink shirts I've ever worn, but there you go.
What's more orange?
Well, I don't know. They were pink in the original,
right.
But yeah, that's Schilling before. Yeah, Schilling back in the Philly days, and that's yeah. So the All-Star game a few years ago.
It's all right. Don't worry about it.
So yeah, I would say that Doc and I were subscribers to KP. It was a wonderful youth baseball sheet that, and there used to be copies in the school library. I hope they're still there. And one of our students tonight said he still has all his KPs. So they're classics. You may see one or two before this series is over. So welcome, Tyler. We look forward to hearing from you. Feel free, if I screw up any history, to interrupt me. And there'll be time later on too. But you're in this with us. It's so please join in. So welcome. So now we're going to do a little bit of history, just a little bit of background history. I pardon those of you, and there are quite a few of you who really know baseball. Hopefully this isn't too repetitive, but I just feel like I need to give a little bit of history background given my teaching. And I always started Doc's class by reading this short excerpt, which I gave you in the handouts, from Ken Burns' companion volume to his series of baseball. I just think it's a wonderful, brief introduction. So pardon me, but I'm going to read it again. It measures just 9 inches in circumference, weighs only about 5 ounces, and is made of cork wound with woolen yarn, covered with 2 layers of cowhide, and stitched by hand precisely 216 times. It travels 60 feet 6 inches from the pitcher's mound to home. It can cover that distance at nearly 100 miles an hour. Today, 100 miles an hour is common. Along the way, it can be made to twist, spin, curve, wobble, rise, or fall away. The bat is made of turned ash, less than 42 inches long, not more than 2.5 inches in diameter. The batter has only a few thousandths of a second to decide to hit his ball, and yet the men who fail 7 times out of 10 are considered the game's greatest heroes. It is a leisurely game that demands blinding speed and the only one in which the defense has the ball. It follows the seasons, beginning each year with the fond expectancy of springtime and ending with the hard facts of autumn. Americans have played baseball for more than 200 years, while they conquered a continent, warred with one another and with enemies abroad, struggled over labor and civil rights and the meaning of freedom. At the game's heart lie mythic contradictions, a pastoral game, born in crowded cities, an exhilarating democratic sport that tolerates cheating and has excluded as many as it has included, a profoundly conservative game that sometimes manages to be years ahead of its time. It is an American odyssey that links sons and daughters to fathers and grandfathers, and it reflects a host of age-old American tensions between workers and owners, scandal and reform, the individual and the collective. It is a haunted game in which every player is measured against the ghosts of all who have gone before. Most of all, it is about time and timelessness, speed and grace, failure and loss, imperishable hope, and coming home. I like that. Baseball's been around a long time. I was just reading today, they found a document in Massachusetts dated I should have written the date down, 1761, I think, in which they think is the first reference to a baseball game. Now, what baseball game meant back in 1761, not anything like we're thinking of it today, but they're playing around with that document and trying to figure out to what degree it really is a founding document for us. And there's lots of debate over baseball and cricket and all that. Spalding helped to promote the idea of maybe the myths of Cooperstown. Maybe someday we'll know better. But certainly by the time of Walt Whitman, I think this is a wonderful quote too. The game was here and it was established and a loved game. It has been called America's pastime. There are those today who might disagree with that and think that football or something else is today. For me, it is the American pastime, and Whitman's closing words here fits into them as significantly as our Constitution's laws, is just as important in the sum total of our historic life. And I think baseball really does follow the path of our history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we'll look at some of that in these 4 short weeks. The New York Knickerbockers was arguably one of the very first baseball clubs. Love the uniforms.
Okay.
1847, this photo. They laid down the first rules of baseball. They certainly aren't the rules that we follow today, but that's when the rules started to lay down. Spalding in the 1880s will start publishing books on the rules, and they will evolve. He'll publish until 1939. And maybe Tyler at some point can speak to how the rules have changed because of the pandemic, and to what degree are those good changes, practical changes. Is 7 innings a no-no or not? And Tyler wrote a nice piece about that in the New York Times the other day. Given my interest and background, I could not include this photograph, given my passion for the Civil War. 48th New York Volunteer occupied the Confederate fort at Fort Pulaski in Georgia, just east of Savannah. And they were there for 2 years during the war. And what's notable about this is in the parade ground, you have the regiment in its dress colors, dress unis, but in the background is a baseball game. And there's a guy there with a bat in the foreground of the players, and it's maybe one of the first photographs we have of a baseball game in action, and certainly it's one of the few we have of the Civil War. There's also a great letter written by a Union soldier stationed in Texas, and they were playing a game, and the game had to be called to a halt because the battle started and there were cannonballs being lobbed into the outfield. So they broke up the game. That was in 1864, I believe, and went from playing baseball to shooting at each other. After the Civil War was over, the game really is established. And the professional leagues are formed. And there were several leagues competing against each other various times, foreshadowing what became, of course, the American League and the National League. I love their uniforms. Pittsburgh Alleghenies will become the Pittsburgh Pirates, and it turns out that the Alleghenies got caught up into a cheating scandal. And so the press and other, I don't know if they were fans or not, but began to call them quote unquote pirates. The name stuck, they liked the nickname, and so they switched from being the Alleghenies to the Pirates. And I think, baseball's full of wonderful names, including even today. Go back and look at the list of Hall of Fame players. They're great names. Pud Galvin, Hall of Fame pitcher for the Pirates, for the Alleghenies. So uniforms were set, stadiums were being built, and the rules were being laid down and would evolve. We think this is the first known video of a piece of the game. It was, there it goes.
Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Oh, buy me some peanuts and cracker jack. I don't care if I never get back. Let me root for the whole team. If they don't win in the game, for it's 1, 2, 3, strike you're out at the old ball game. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd.
They think that was filmed in Newark, New Jersey. Not quite sure of its origins, other than it's from Edison. Part of the nuts and bolts of the game, which to me are a lot of the fun. There's a lot of numbers involved in the game. So on the right, you have the minimum size of the field and how far from the pitcher's mound you have to have the home plate and second base and outfields, left field, center field, and right field. Stadiums vary from place to place. Philly's Citizens Bank Park is known as a bandbox. Supposedly easy to hit a lot of home runs, although right now the Phillies are not necessarily hitting a lot of home runs except for 2 guys. But we'll let that go. It's only the first third of the season. This is when they're figuring everything out, let's hope. And the Mets are, they're ahead of us, but only by a hair. I'm counting on all the teams in our division beating up on each other.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine the Mets will be there in first place at the end, but we'll see.
I certainly can, yes.
Speaking of numbers, I don't know how many of you have ever scored a game. It's one of my great pleasures. And so they assign names or numbers, excuse me, to the positions, as you can see in the diagram on the left-hand side of 1 through 9. And you need to know those numbers in order to score properly on a scorecard, which is pretty small. And one of the great pleasures was to teach the scoring system to Doc's students. And then when we went down to Citizens Bank Park to a Phillies game, they got extra credit for one of their quizzes if they scored the game.
They got actually journal entries. They could do a journal entry. And I have to say that while there were some who were very, very astute and would follow your directions, there were others who thought that it was a time for a little narrative. So they'd have like, the player ran really hard. Like, what is that? That's not a scorecard.
Sitting in our midst tonight is one very fine scorekeeper. I happen to know because I saw the books he would keep, and that's Zach Berman. Par excellence.
Well, when you don't get in the actual games, you have to keep score. So that's why I got pretty good at that.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, that's why Nate was pretty good at keeping score too. So any live game I would go to, starting particularly in '93 when I got a small package of tickets and then ended up buying more tickets because once the big surprise hit, I would always keep the score. And a friend of mine who would go to the games with me, who was a teacher when I was teaching at St. Joe's Prep, he had a St. Joe's math professor who would come. And this math professor, who went to about 50 or 60 games a year, would buy the cheapest seat he could and just keep score. And it was his passion. And he had stacks upon stacks of score sheets, and it was so fun to look at those. So it's there's a little bit of magic to keeping a good scorecard, that you can look at it, read it, and understand the whole game. It's an art of sorts. And as I said, Zach was par excellent. a lot of fun. And if you've never scored a game, you should try it sometime. You can do it on TV as well. So you can download for free blank scorecards of various types, and you should give it a try. And there's a number of sites on the web that can give you a little tutorial about it. There's even a YouTube clip if you want.
Kendall, did you add those little pieces of peanuts?
No, I
As an artistic kind of movie?
it absolutely is artistic. You know, it appealed to my artistic sense.
I think, yes.
And because you go to a baseball game, you have to eat a hot dog, unless for religious reasons you can't. And you have to eat peanuts, unless you're a weird Baltimore Oriole fan. And then when you go to Baltimore, you eat pistachios. I don't know where that came from.
No, you still can get the peanuts there though.
You can, but a lot of
But I understand. Yeah.
And of course, they don't sing the national anthem or the the seventh inning stretch. They sing "Thank God I'm a Country Boy." Never acquired a taste
No.
for that at a baseball game.
Well, I love that though. That's so cool. It's such an Oriole thing. It's great.
Absolutely, I'm making fun.
Like the Mets have the Mets play Lazy Mary for some reason. I love it. It's great. I don't like when the Mets play Piano Man. I don't think that's a good sing along. I've written that many times. It's Piano Man is an anthem to alcoholism and regret. So maybe it is good for the Mets fans, but I don't see it as a ballpark song. That's just me.
I don't embrace that, but I understand it. Lazy Mary?
I don't even know that song.
Oh yeah, you've heard it. You've heard it a million times. If you go to the games, you'll hear it. Every day. They've been playing it every day for at least 20 years.
Wow.
Okay, I'm writing it down. I will check that out after this session. So, okay, so that's all I have for a little brief intro into baseball history. In my next handout, I will include a short list of recommended books. If you'd like to read about the history of baseball, there's a couple of really great ones that are relatively new. But of course, the most important one for the history of baseball that you should be thinking about right now is K by Tyler Kepner. But more on that later. All right, Doc, it's your turn.
Okay. So I assume that all of you have your poems in front of you. If you don't, please get them there quickly. You'll notice that the stadium there is the Polo Grounds. And it's as you can see, it's a really weirdly shaped stadium. And when I say my grandfather and I were close to the players, you can really see how close the right field line is to the stands. And of course, the center field was crazy. It's like almost 500 feet. And that's where, possibly the most famous catch of all time, Willie Mays, with his back to the plate, did a basket catch during the World Series, wasn't it, Tyler? Yeah. Okay, so we're going to start. I want to just tell you a little bit about poems written by some pretty famous poets, and a lot of famous and well-recognized poets have made baseball the subject of their work, and often using the sport as a metaphor for life, for writing, for growing up, for death. Robert Frost wrote about baseball. So did Marianne Moore, William Carlos Williams, John Updike, beat poets like Lawrence Ferlinghetti, May Swenson, and Robert Pack, who taught me at Middlebury. Jack Buck, Hall of Fame broadcaster, wrote some really good baseball poems. So did players like Jim Mudcat Grant, pitcher, and Steve Blass, who was a Pittsburgh pitcher. Even Charlie Manuel wrote a not awful poem about baseball. Not good by any stretch of the literary, standpoint, but not bad and very appreciative of the game. So for today, I have three poems that I'd like to share with you that pretty much cover some of this metaphorical land, and I think show how baseball connects to life. So the first one is by Linda Paston, who was nominated for the National Book Award twice, has written 15 books of poems, and is still writing at 88 and going to baseball games. So I'm going to read the poem, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Okay, and then the next poems, if somebody else wants to read it, that's fine. Otherwise, I'll read it. Whatever. Okay, so this is Baseball by Linda Paston. When you tried to tell me baseball was a metaphor for life, the long, dusty travail around the bases, for instance, to try to go home again, the sacrifice for which you win approval, but not applause, the way light closes down in the last days of the season. I didn't believe you. It's just a way of passing the time, I said. And you said, that's it. Yes. So, tell me why you think the poem might hinge on that last line.
It's just like one of your normal classes, Doc.
Hey, Doc, I've got a couple of thoughts on that. One, there's
you go ahead, buddy.
One is the obvious similarity to it being the American pastime. And I was actually, when I read this, I actually thought to the popularity of the Korean Baseball League as one of the first televised baseball leagues to pick back up during the pandemic, and how popular it was that people were tuning in and developing favorites as a way of distraction. I think people, there are a lot of people for whom baseball's too slow. I think anybody who wants the game to end really quickly don't get baseball. And so this notion of passing time with baseball, the fact that it's untimed, the fact that they try and keep speeding it up with different rules, I think it's at the core of what's special about baseball.
Nice. Someone else? What else does passing time suggest?
I think if I can jump in,
Sure.
I think if you tie it just to the first line and then to the last line, it's that life is just passing time.
Excellent.
So he's agreeing that baseball is the metaphor of life, because life is ultimately passing time with all of those things involved. Yeah,
and it's a metaphor, and a lot of folks talk about the myth of baseball, how baseball is really a mythic sport. I'm wondering whether anybody can see myths at work in this poem.
So I'll jump in, Doc.
Go ahead.
It's the myth of you can't go home again.
Yes.
But you can in baseball, and guess what? We've all just gone home again with this class.
Whoa. Oh, wait, excuse me, you're getting a table slap.
Especially those of us who came through GA.
Yeah, absolutely. Other mythic elements that you see. Well, one thing, going home again, most of you, when you were at GA, had to struggle through, or perhaps delighted in, the Odyssey, which is, the quintessential, going home story, right? So this is just sort of, replicating that kind of myth.
Doc, I'll jump in following my brother. I don't appreciate that you took my Odyssey point, but I think you said it better than I could. I would add I would add the capitalization of sacrifice. I found interesting. Thank you. I thought that might get a table slap. So I also, I don't want to jump in. I think the next the
You already
idea,
have, but go ahead.
the idea of sacrifice ties to the next poem, I think. But yeah, I see the capitalization of that. I found interesting, and obviously ties. I think there's a religious aspect there. To my brother's point around life being a metaphor, I think it ties to that. So.
The next couple words in that or the next line in that's really important too. So it's not just a sacrifice, but it's one that draws different levels of approval, right? Not applause, but approval. It's certainly key to the element of baseball, and frankly, the degree to which you're knowledgeable of baseball. You'll hear, I think Mattern made the point that Kendall made the point that the Lenny Dykstra was a terrible father. You see lots of really bad fathers out on the sidelines of baseball fields, and who do not celebrate the sacrifice of the game. And it's you see lots of selfish players, and so this notion of sacrifice and the emotional reaction to that sacrifice is being important.
And and of course the sacrifice that one. If you go back to baseball, one has to make to be a teammate. It's not all about you.
Doc, I'll chime in there. One of the things that we found yesterday afternoon as we played an inter-squad scrimmage with our middle school baseball boys and the 8th graders and all their braggadocio and their strength and their wisdom, and the 7th graders who were dropping balls in the outfield and not catching the balls that came to home plate and overthrowing the cutoff man, and the anger and frustration that was demonstrated by the boys who were leaders on the team. And I have the privilege of working with Matt Dentz. I'm sorry, Kendall, I said that out loud, but I have to admit that I am working with Matt Dentz. And the ability for him to pull a boy aside who is a early teen and say, hey, look, the best players on the team are the ones that teach and help and grow. Not one of you can play this game by yourself. You need a team around you, and the best teammates are the ones that support those around them.
That's perfect. Yeah. And that's again what the poem is about. And then of course, and that's really kind of heroic. I mean, I think that Paston is talking about there's a certain kind of heroism, muted heroism by the person who sacrifices. And then we come to the last days of the season, and the third poem that I chose by Bukowski is very much about that. It's a poem written on his 71st birthday. And having just turned 70, it makes me nervous. Anyway, let's move on. Any other questions, points about that poem? I know that I was told not to, blather on, and I'm trying not to too much.
You're doing well, Doc. You're doing well.
Thank you, Kendall. Thank you. So we're going to do Sign from My Father, Who Stressed the Bunt. And this is by a poet named David Bottoms, certainly not as well known as Robert Frost, but he's an award-winning poet, written 9 books of poems and been published in the New Yorker, the Atlantic, the Paris Review, Southern Review, and he currently teaches at Georgia State University, where he holds the Distinguished Chair in English Letters. Now, if there is somebody who would very much like to read the poem, and I'm not going to interrupt your reading, please volunteer. If not, I'll be glad to read it.
I'll read it.
Who said that?
Tyler Fenwick.
Hey, Tyler. Go for it.
How you doing?
I'm doing fine.
All right.
Yeah.
On the rough diamond, the hand-cut field below the dog lot and barn, we rehearsed the strict technique of bunting. I watched from the infield, the mound, the backstop, as your left hand climbed the bat, the legs and shoulders squared toward the pitcher. You could drop it like a seed down either baseline. I admired your style, but not enough to take my eyes off the that served as our center field fence. Years passed. 3 leagues of organized ball, no few lives. I could homer into the left field lot of Carmichael Motors and still you stress the same technique, the crouch and the spring, the lead arm absorbing just enough impact. That whole tiresome pitch about basics never changing. And I never learned what you were laying down. Like a hand brushed across the bill of a cap, let this be the sign. I'm getting a grip on the sacrifice.
Beautifully read. Table stop.
You're making me blush.
Well, you deserve it. That was just beautifully read. Do me a favor, everybody. Circle words that seem especially distinctive to you, and then we'll work from there. Might be surprising for the context. Jesus Christ.
Please mute.
I'll give you another minute. Okay. Who has some words?
Dog, lot, and barn.
Okay, so why did that strike you?
It reminds me a lot of the fields that I played on as a child, Pete. You know, Doc,
That's it.
when I was a kid growing up in Northeast Philadelphia, where we played, it wasn't about the grass. It wasn't about anything other than there were 4 bases and you were playing. And that was all that mattered. Whether it was a sand lot, whether it was a dirt field, whether you're at Jardel Rec or you're at the Police Athletic League at Rising Sun and Longshore, you were playing the game. And that's all that mattered. You know, bats over shoulders with gloves on the end, kids riding their bikes up the street to go to the game.
It's very down home poem, isn't it? It's a very down home, but as opposed to the first one, which is really kind of, philosophical. But this one, we've all been there, right? What's another word?
I had seed as a word that stood out.
Okay. And why did that?
The poem is about time passing and growth and maturity, things you learn with age, right? A father planting a seed that could serve as a metaphor for something that will grow with time for the son to understand and appreciate.
Thanks. Well, that was beautifully. There's stuff on my table that's starting to fall to the floor. So next time I'm just going to have to remove everything from it. Other words.
I'm happy to jump in.
Yeah.
Pitch and sign both jumped out at me because they're used to allude to both versions of the word.
Excellent.
Pitch, both as a screed that someone says, and the pitching motion. Sign, both as the greater importance and the traditional baseball signs. I think there's probably other similar uses.
Yeah, but that's great. That's great. Did anybody find? I mean, the one that I remember the first time I read the poem that I noticed was rehearsed. And did anyone else notice that as a sort of a distinctive word, or is it just me? I mean, I thought of like rehearse, like, okay, you keep rehearsing so that one day you will reach a kind of, place of perfection, and yet you never really do. So you have to keep rehearsing it. How old is
it's also different than practicing.
Yes.
Strikingly. Like the theatrical element to it versus the drilling, if you will, of
Mhm.
of routine. There's something more illustrative than just practicing.
Because this,
And I think it's,
yeah, go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry, I was gonna say, I think it's also evocative of the practice of a child learning to become an adult. There's some sort of rehearsing aspect to that of a father teaching a child how to, not only how to bunt, but how to be.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. And, you know, and there's something about his father's, the way, you know, the detail that he goes to in describing it, the crouch and spring, the lead arm absorbing just enough impact. The father is a kind of artist. The father's a performer. I mean, you know, there's something artistic about what the father does here, and it sort of raises this, you know, the importance, I think, of this skill that, you know, that the dad is trying to teach his son. Why would you mention something like Carmichael Motors?
It dates it, even for those of us who have no idea what Carmichael Motors is.
Well, I don't know what the hell it is either.
But it's not now. It's not recent.
But yeah, it makes it a place, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It just like you were talking about before, Mr. Wetzel, when you talked about, you know, being in the Northeast. I think, well, everybody has a Carmichael Motors. Everybody who's played the game, there's a place where if you hit it, it was a home run, right? I mean, and it differed from everybody, but this one sort of concretizes the experience for the speaker. And
hey Doc, I have one that I circled because it confused me.
All right.
The expression, the line about staring at the bank that is our center field, my brain immediately went to like a bank branch, and obviously they're talking about like a hill or some bank as it relates to you know, a physical substitute for an actual fence, but it's a very strange line, because there's no good reason to be staring at whichever bank in center field. There's nothing happening out there. There's nothing obvious. It's not staring at a tree that might be more interesting. I couldn't get my arms around why.
So
that
why
line's so
would? Oh,
strange.
yeah, that's a great great point, Norman. Why do you think the kid is looking at that bank in center field?
Because he's focused on hitting home runs. He doesn't
Exactly.
Right?
I was going to say he's looking. I was going to say I think he's looking at the future and in the distance, always looking ahead. And the father's looking at day to day, what's practical, putting the base down the line, you know, putting the bunt down the line. And he's always looking. When you're young, you're always looking ahead to the future. But as you get older, you know that it's the day to day things that matter.
So it's wistfulness.
Yeah. I think, you know, after he admires him, right, for how, you know, how you know, artfully he prepares for the bunt, he says, I admired your style, but not enough, right? In other words, back in the day, I looked at you, that was good, I like that bunt, but you know, bunts are sacrifices, and you know, you don't get famous with bunts.
Yeah, bunts don't put people in the seats.
Yeah, you know, exactly.
You know, but I think that I saw that whole poem kind of as the same thing. You know, as he grew up, he started to really appreciate, you know, what we would call small ball. You know, a home run is just one run, and one person does it. But how many people are involved if there's a successful sacrifice to bring somebody around all the way around to score the same run? You know, it just, to me, it evoked a lot more teamwork and cooperation and the kind of thing, like, you know, practice is boring. Everybody just wants to jump in the box and hit the ball as far as they can, you know, but when you really think about the metaphor with life, you know, you're not born able to do what you're going to do for your whole career, unless you're somebody like Ty. who, but you know, you have to hone your craft no matter what that craft is. And to become fully complete, you have to look at the small details just as much as the big glamorous parts.
At the same time, there's a very famous saying in the Dominican Republic: "You can't walk off the island."
Yeah.
I noticed the words laying down and sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a man speaking about when he was a kid, and he really loved his dad. Like, he watched his dad like a hawk. I love the line about dropping it down like a seed. And he's watching his left hand climb up the bat. Like he's watching him. But he's also taking his eyes off things. He's a kid, and he is focused on the future because that's what kids do. But it seems like in his advanced age, he's really realizing the time that his dad took. And it wasn't just baseball. Baseball is just a metaphor here. But the time that his dad took to sacrifice and lay his own life down for his kid and to teach him lessons.
So when he says, "I'm getting a grip on the sacrifice," the last line, what does that suggest to you? You know, because I think you're dead on, Tyler, but
I think it suggests to me that he's starting to realize maybe he's a father now.
Yeah.
And he's starting to realize like I'm a dad now. I have a 1.5-year-old. I now have a much clearer sense of what my what I put my parents through, and two, all the sacrifices they made. My whole life is about my kid. And I love it. I'm happy to do it. But that seems to be the essence of what this is. It's an ode to his father and appreciation.
Excellent.
Peter, keep an eye on your time, please.
I am. We're going to move move on. No, I mean, I actually, we've got about 13 minutes, I think. Is that right, Kendall?
You got 15.
Thank you. So the next poem for my 71st birthday by Charles Bukowski. He was quite a character, this guy. He's a novelist, poet, short story writer, published over 60 books, a lot of them really short. The FBI kept a file on him for his column, Notes from a Dirty Old Man, in an LA alternative newspaper. He was arrested by the FBI in 1944 for draft evasion. And he went to, and the reason is that he was German American. And eventually it got cleared up, but he spent 17 days in, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this, Myomissing prison. Is that around here?
That's in northeastern PA, I believe.
That's Moyamensing.
Moyamensing, thank you.
That was in South Philadelphia.
Oh. Well, he went to one of these prisons. But, he's called the poet laureate of the lowlives. And because his poems often dealt with individuals on the fringes of society in Los Angeles. And, but so people who are a little bit kinder to him says, he's a poet who appreciates struggle and the struggle of everyone. So anyway, any reader for Bukowski? Want me to do it? Maybe I should, because, I'm practically that age. Okay, so poem for my 71st birthday. Yes, I'm still here doing about what I've always done, although there are some moments of hesitation. Like I'll be at the plate and the big guy out there will be about ready to fire one in, and I'll call time. Step outside the batter's box, knock some dirt off my cleats, look around. There's sometimes blinding flashes of light in my eyes. but I'll gather myself, shake it off, get back in the box, feel the power returning. I can't wait for the big guy's next pitch. And it comes in, a slider. Bastard can't fool me. I get the wood on it. It goes out of there, way out of there. And I trot the bases as the young guys curse me under their breath. Too bad, fellows. You see, you have to have a feel for it. And as long as it's there, you keep going. And when you can't do it anymore, you'll still be asking for one more turn at bat, just to be there, even to swing and miss. It's the doing that gets it done. Don't you understand this? Like this one here. It's probably only a single or a short hopper to the shortstop, but I've had my swing. And I'll be back a few times more. The big guy doesn't have me out of here yet. Love that poem. So, who's the speaker talking about?
God.
It's a non-sectarian school, Doc. You're not allowed to say it.
I understand that. I understand that. And I'm ignoring that entirely because I am no longer a paid member of the faculty. Yeah, God. And so what's this guy's relationship as he's reaching the age of 71 with God and with himself and with his life?
Adversarial and living in spite of what God throws at him.
Yeah. And so what do you make of some of the expressions? Again, maybe some have, have struck you, like, and I'll just start off with one that immediately struck me with the moments of hesitation. There are some moments of hesitation. What are they? What do you think they are? And this is big time metaphor of life, isn't it? So what are the moments of hesitation?
As you get older, you move slower.
Yeah. What else? What are any other possibilities?
Self-doubt.
Hmm?
I was going to say, reflecting on your life and self-doubt.
Ah, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And
Change.
Change. Sure.
Illness and grief.
Illness, grief. Yeah. I mean, this really is a poem that covers oh God, I was going to say covers so many bases. God, that's like an anti-table slap. Okay. So when he says, I'll call time, how do you see that line?
So I kind of actually looked at, came away with thinking of like resilience in a way, that this is kind of like, you're going to get knocked down and maybe you do have to take a step back and kind of reassess things and see what's coming. And if you can figure out how to, quote unquote, hit it out of the park. And it's sort of that like going through life and having all those, times where you're going to get knocked out, but can you get back up? And usually you want that, it's better than death, right? You want to be able to get back up again and try one more bat. So that was kind of like,
that's really good, Clint. So would you say that the speaker is representing resilience in a way?
That's at least, yeah, that's sort of what I took away from it. That was sort of my initial reaction to it, is that this is somebody who's, again, taking that moment to step back, regroup, comes back in and tries sort of the next, to fight through for the next pitch or whatever it's going to be, and then, hits one out of the park, and then, well, not out of the park, sorry, but, is able to hit the next one. But then is still talking about, he's old enough now that he can see what's coming. So he's had the experience to be able to sort of see, or to anticipate what to do, versus perhaps when he was younger, and all the young guys that are upset that he's, hit it so well that they're not there yet.
Even to the point of referring to the poem itself and saying that this one's not a home run, this one's a single. But all you young writers out there, sorry, I'm still here. I'm still playing.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, there's a delayed for Quinn. Because that was a rather expansive explanation. So, well, you tell me, what are some other things that struck you about the poem? It can be what we've been talking about, or anything else.
I'll jump in quickly. It's interesting. I find in baseball writing, and even in the previous two poems, you get themes of like sacrifice and humility and failing 7 out of 10 times makes you a hero. I found this to be kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was a certain amount of swagger and attitude towards it that you maybe don't get often in baseball writing, which I enjoyed. And obviously with the themes of he's a hitter taking on what God throws at him, and he has the pizzazz and he'll hit it out. And even if it's a ground ball this time, he can't wait to get back up at bat. So I enjoyed that kind of, I don't know, the dichotomy of the various poems that we read.
That's really, that's really interesting. It is very different. I mean, it's certainly not, it doesn't really promote some of the myths that we normally associate with the game. I mean, a line like, you'll still be asking for one more turn at bat, just to be there, even to swing and miss. It's the doing that gets it done. Don't you understand this? Yeah, go ahead.
That's the line that really caught me. And it's kind of trite, but I immediately flashed to that, to Tom Hanks's soliloquy in League of Their Own, when he said, everybody, if everybody could do it, it wouldn't be that special. It's being hard that makes it so great. And for some reason, that line just shot me right into, kind of hearing him give that whole speech that he gave in the movie there. And I mean, what better kind of narrative on both, baseball and life in the matter of, it's not going to be easy, and it shouldn't be easy, because if it's easy, then what are you really getting out of it? If nothing's ever a challenge, then how do you ever know what success or failure really is? And how can you really ever celebrate success without having to go through the pain of failure, and vice versa? If everything's always, wham, right down the middle, easy, okay, done, move on, okay, easy, done, move on, then where's the satisfaction for ever excelling?
Yeah. And can you also see, remember I told you that he was sort of like, the poet laureate of, of essentially the lowlifes. Can you see that in this poem?
Absolutely. This is the anthem for the 93 Phillies. This is the crotch grabbing, spitting, John Kruk losing a testicle, Lenny Dykstra, the Kurt Schilling, the messes that they all are in their lives. I mean, this to Tim Vernon's point, this is the celebration of all the things in baseball that's been there for 200 years that nobody likes to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, this guy is this speaker is no hero in any sense of the word, other than I just do it. I just keep on going. That's it. That's all. I mean, he doesn't compliment himself. He just kind of looks at the young ones and say, you haven't really lived yet.
But that can be heroic in itself.
Yeah.
To just keep going.
Absolutely.
No accolades, no big parades, whatever, but you go out and you get the job done.
Yep.
You just keep going out every single day and get the job done.
Yep.
I think that point is delivered in the title as well. He's not celebrating. Usually we celebrate those milestones of 50 and 70, but he's talking about his 71st. So it's kind of like, I'm beyond the celebration. I'm still here. I'm still batting.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I was depressed on my 70th.
But maybe you'll feel better on your 71st.
I bought myself a convertible. Yeah.
Good for you. I think about it like whatever the year was, maybe he had prostate cancer and you didn't know how he was going to treat it and what it was going to do. And then he found a way with radiation, and he knows that he's beaten it and that he will be fine. And it's that kind of recovery, the resilience that you talk about.
Yeah. And
that's the first thing I saw there.
He was not a well man. I mean, he was sick throughout his through his life. Yeah, all of that is great, but I think we've run out of time, right? This is depressing. Is that is that correct, Heather?
Yeah, I technically, yeah. I hate to cut off the conversation because
Doc, as long as we're doing poetry, let me read one that doesn't need any explanation or whatever.
It's not by Charlie Manuel, is it?
It's by Harry Callis.
Oh.
I was digging through some old stuff recently, and I found this that he sent me. Because he was just the greatest guy ever. You wrote him a congratulatory note. He was going to send you something back. Yeah. He was just so this is what he said at his Hall of Fame speech in 2002. This is to the Philadelphia fan, to laud your passion as best I can. Your loyalty is unsurpassed. Be the fightins in first or last. We come to the park each day, looking forward to another fray, because we know you'll be there. We know you really care. You give opposing pitchers fits, because as one loyalist shouts, everybody hits. To be sure, in Philly, there might be some boos, because you passionate fans, like the manager, hate to lose. Your reaction to the action on the field that you impart spurs us as broadcasters to call the game with enthusiasm and heart. We feel your passion through and through. Philadelphia fans, I love you. Harry Callis, 2002.
Wow, that's great. That's great. I've never heard that before.
Yeah,
never heard that before. And I have to say that he's quite a bit better than Charlie Manuel.
They should really. I mean, if they should put that on a just on a display or something at Citizens Bank Park. I mean, I think people would love to just.
I think so too. Well, you should. You have the influence and power, Tyler, to do that sort of thing.
Well, I don't know about that. What I'm trying to do, my new cause, is to try to get the Phillies to name the little half infield right out at the entrance of the spring training site, the complex, to name it after Larry Bowa, because Larry Bowa has spent years and years there every morning in spring training. It's like his home. He's born to be a coach. He's born to be hitting fungos at 7 a.m. And hitting ground balls. And I just think they should name it Larry Bowa Field forever, because he's 75 or 80, whenever he is 80, he's not going to live forever. He's in great health, as far as I know.
But you don't have to keep pushing that,
Do it before.
He's only 75.
Do it while he can enjoy it.
About a month apart.
Do it while he can enjoy it.
That's a great idea.
So,
by the way, Tyler,
that's been in the Inquirer. Brookover has written that.
Yeah,
he's given me credit for it. So hopefully, I've told Middleton. I don't know if it's going anywhere, but that's my Phillies cause right now, and then I'll get to work on the poem.
Well, maybe Kendall and I can use our influence.
McCarthy.
Maybe we better shut up. Hey, Tyler, I wanted to
the adjacent half field. They keep talking about it in Boa. They've been talking it up on the air, but they have not mentioned that there's a naming campaign. They ought to.
Oh, good. Well, no, that's fine. I know those guys well. Those are great. They don't have to name me every time. I just want to get it done. I just want that to happen. I mean, there's no reason why it shouldn't. It was beautiful that they named the performance facility there after David Montgomery, while Dave was still around to recognize it, to be appreciated. So, again, I hope Larry Bowa lives for 40 more years, but they should definitely do it. And I'm glad to hear that they talk about it. That's great.
Hey, Tyler, I wanted to, since nobody listening and probably knows this, but I wanted to, thank you again for the times you spent with my son Brendan and me when he was a little guy. We would go down to spring training when Tyler, was working as the beat writer for my favorite team and had not moved on to the satanic Yankees at that point. But yeah, he introduced us to so many players, and I still remember. I don't know if you remember this, Tyler, but the years we went there, every year we saw Turk Wendell. And did you know that he gave Brendan one of those animal teeth, one of the teeth from his necklace?
Really? I didn't know that.
Yes. Yeah.
That is so cool.
One time, because, one year we saw him without you, and another year, you introduced us. But yeah, he was so weird, that guy. But he's the nicest. He was the nicest Met that we met. And Ricky Henderson was my least favorite. It's like, he couldn't give a shit about anybody.
That was not a happy spring for Ricky that year. But Turk actually reached out to Taiwan Walker because he's wearing number 99 now. He's the first.
I heard that. 99
in 20 years. And Turk sent him a shark tooth necklace with all the
and that I just thought I thought of that with Brendan. Yeah. So
last thing, Turk once asked for his $10 million contract to be 1 penny less than that officially. So
it'll be all nines.
Because he was at 99. So give me 1 penny less, he said. And
he was a character for both the Mets and the Phillies. And he was a pretty good pitcher too.
Yeah, nice one career.
Yeah. At least he didn't give you one of his toothbrushes, Doc.
No, or a used piece of licorice.
Right.
It's a great story to end on. I always believe leave them wanting more. We're going to be back next week to start talking about the Negro Leagues, one of my favorite topics, and some great poetry to go along with that. This has been, I think, a fantastic start. Thank you all for wanting to participate. Those who did, hopefully a few more will want to next time.
But we don't want the riffraff.
No riffraff, but there is no riffraff here as far as
not today. Yeah,
is McEwen not invited or what?
What's that?
Is Mike McEwen not invited in that case or what?
I'm surprised that he's not here because I'll bring out the bat.
Yes, I know.
Here we go. That's it.
All right. Great to see you all.
Thank you all.
Take care. Be well.
See you next.